Picture this, a geopolitical chessboard, where a nation that isn't even officially recognized holds the key to a global power struggle. Well, that's exactly what's happening right now in the Horn of Africa. These ancient trade routes have become the front lines of a new great game, and the stakes are incredibly high. Let's dive in and see what's really going on.
At the very heart of this whole complex situation is one single fascinating question. How did Somaliland, a state that officially doesn't exist in the eyes of the world, somehow become the strategic linchpin in a power struggle involving some major global players? That's the puzzle we are going to unpack today.
So to help us navigate this tangled web of alliances and rivalries, we're going to be relying on the really in-depth analysis of 𝐫𝐤𝐢𝐚. He's a specialist in the diplomacy of the Horn of Africa, and his work gives us the perfect framework for understanding these huge geopolitical shifts.
All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll set the stage on this new geopolitical chessboard. Then we'll break down the two opposing sides. You've got this emerging alliance centered in Somalia and a counter-alignment that's anchored by Somaliland. After that, we'll zero in on what the analysis calls India's decisive move. And finally, we'll explore how that one move could shift the entire regional balance.
Okay, let's get started. The Horn of Africa is home to some of the world's most critical maritime choke points. We're talking the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, and the Gulf of Aden. Now, these aren't just patches of water. They are the absolute lifelines of global trade and energy. Whoever controls or even influences these sea lanes holds immense strategic power. And you can bet the world's major powers are paying very close attention.
So what's shaking things up? A new, kind of flexible power block is emerging, and its operational heart is in one of the world's most fragile states, Somalia. Now, this isn't some formal treaty like NATO. Think of it as a more opportunistic alliance with a very specific goal of projecting power.
𝐫𝐤𝐢𝐚's analysis actually calls this a hedging structure. But what on earth does that mean? Well, basically, it's a loose, interest-driven partnership between Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. It's born from this shared belief that, traditional allies like the US might not be as reliable as they used to be. And it's also built on a shared interest in projecting power by taking advantage of the instability in a country like Somalia.
So let's break down the players. First up, Turkey. Ankara has done something pretty smart here, strategically speaking. They've turned Somalia's governance vacuum into their own military advantage. They set up Camp 𝐾𝐿, their biggest overseas military base, right there in Mogadishu. This has effectively turned a fragile state into a forward operating base for drone integration, naval exercises, and intelligence gathering right on the shores of the Indian Ocean. Next, you've got Pakistan. Now, Islamabad's role isn't so much about a massive physical presence. It's more about providing the operational muscle behind the scenes. They embed military personnel in training programs and intelligence units, sharing their combat expertise. This really shows how Pakistan is stretching its military influence way beyond South Asia, getting experience in overseas deployments and even running cyber operations from this new theater.
And of course, the big question, who's paying for all of this? Well, that's where Saudi Arabia steps in. Riyadh is providing the critical financial and logistical backbone. By bankrolling the Turkish and Pakistani operations, Saudi Arabia can project its influence and hedge its bets against regional rivals, all without having to put its own boots on the ground.
So, as you can see, it's a very neat division of labor. Each partner brings something unique and absolutely necessary to the table. Turkey provides the military base, that hard power footprint, Pakistan brings the operational know-how and the training, and Saudi Arabia funds the whole enterprise. It's a symbiotic relationship, really, creating a powerful new tool for projecting influence.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Who does this alliance directly threaten? This is the why it all matters part. For India, it's a direct challenge to its dominance in its own backyard, the Indian Ocean. For Israel, it puts a potentially hostile military presence right next to its critical Red Sea access. For the UAE, it empowers the rivals and threatens regional security. And for the United States, well, it's another clear sign of its waning influence.
But this new disruptive force hasn't just gone unchallenged. A powerful counterweight is starting to form, and you might be surprised to hear it's anchored by that unrecognized state right next door, Somaliland. Let's see how this underdog is becoming a stabilizing force in a sea of chaos.
I mean, the contrast here could not be more stark. It's night and day. On one side, you have Somalia, where all these governance vacuums are being exploited, turning it into a volatile operational launchpad for foreign powers. And on the other side, you've got Somaliland, which offers effective territorial control, democratic governance, and a prime strategic location. That makes it a reliable operational anchor for any potential partners.
And you can bet that kind of stability hasn't gone unnoticed. In direct response to that challenger alliance, a natural counter-alignment of nations has started to come together, a whole network of partners with shared interests in keeping the region secure and pushing back against this new bloc.
And here are the key players on this side. According to 𝐫𝐤𝐢𝐲𝐞's analysis, their motivations are crystal clear. You've got the countries that feel the most direct threat: India, Israel, and the UAE. But it also pulls in the regional heavyweights, Ethiopia, which desperately needs secure sea access, the United States, which wants to maintain its influence, and even European partners like Greece and Cyprus, who see this as an extension of their own strategic rivalry with Turkey.
This brings us to the absolute crucial point of 𝐫𝐤𝐢𝐲𝐢𝐚's entire analysis. The key to solidifying this counter-alignment and neutralizing the threat coming from Somalia, it all comes down to a single, decisive strategic move by India, formally recognizing the state of Somaliland.
So how exactly would this work? Well, it's all about creating a powerful strategic triangle. First, you have Ethiopia, a landlocked giant of over 120 million people that is desperate for reliable sea access. Then, you have Somaliland, a stable coastal state that can provide that access through exporter Berbera. And if India, a major maritime power, formally partners with both of them, it cements a secure strategic corridor that stretches all the way from the heart of Africa to the Indian Ocean.
And this is the really brilliant part of the strategy. India wouldn't be building this relationship from scratch. It would be formally plugging itself into an existing, functional partnership between Ethiopia and Somaliland. By doing that, it anchors its presence in a stable, reliable ecosystem, creating a direct and powerful counter to that rival bloc, operating out of volatile Somalia.
The impact of this one single diplomatic act would be enormous. We're talking about a move that wouldn't just send a message, it would fundamentally shift the entire regional balance of power. It would create a completely new reality on the geopolitical map of the Horn of Africa. You know, this quote from the author of the analysis, 𝐫𝐤𝐢𝐲𝐢𝐚, just sums it up perfectly. Somaliland isn't just another piece on the board. It is both a stabilizing anchor for one alliance and a decisive strategic lever that can be used to reshape the entire game.
So, let's be crystal clear about this. Recognizing Somaliland would be so much more than a symbolic gesture. It would be a practical, hard-nosed strategic correction. It's about taking a reality that already exists on the ground, Somaliland's stability, and making it official, to restore balance, strengthen deterrence against the other alliance, and secure vital interests in one of the world's most critical regions. Which of course leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. As this new great game plays out, we're seeing how the strategic interests of faraway powers can put incredible pressure on regional politics and diplomatic norms that have been in place for decades. So the question for the future is, will these powerful strategic interests ultimately be the force that redraws the official map of Africa? And that's our deep dive into the Horn of Africa's new geopolitical landscape, all based on the insightful analysis of 𝐫𝐤𝐢𝐲𝐢𝐚. The key takeaway? In this new era of global competition, the reality on the ground might just become more important than official recognition, and even unrecognized states can become game-changing players.